Well, I could keep thinking about lining up marbles and different techniques, and if I thought about it long enough, I might come up with an idea that would incorporate both the pattern technique and the finger technique. Consider this. How about if I had this many marbles and happened to line them up in a way that looked like this? Well, then something interesting happens. If I want to keep track of what is exactly the size and the shape of this pattern here, I can use my fingers, but instead of this time putting just one particular marble on each finger, I line up the columns of the pattern with my fingers and thumb, and I line up the rows of the pattern with my fingers and thumbs, and then rather than counting the marbles themselves, I'm counting how big the pattern is. I'm counting the rows and the columns in the pattern, and something wonderful, something I'm tempted to say magical. It's not magical, but it can feel and seem that way at first. The total number of marbles that I have here, which is the same as what I started with over here, is more than the total number of fingers, and for that matter, fingers and toes that I have on my whole body, and yet I'm able to keep track of, or effectively count, this many marbles, which is more than fingers and toes that I have, by using my only the fingers on both my hands, but leveraging the pattern so that I don't have to actually count all the marbles. I only have to count in some sense, the outer structure of the way that the pattern is put together. And if I can keep track of the way that the outer part of the structure is put together, then I'll know that as long as I follow the rest of the pattern all the way through, I have the right number of marbles, and I'll know if any have gone missing or not. If any goes missing when I try and line everything up, I'll know something's wrong. I'm able to keep track of an extra number of marbles by not counting all of them, but by keeping track with my fingers of the structure. So we see that patterns, again, mathematics is the study of patterns, and this is precisely the point, is that patterns give us this extra leverage that we wouldn't have if we were just trying to keep track of this whole mess of marbles over here by lining them up and structuring them into this nice pattern. Now my fingers can describe how many there are, even though my fingers wouldn't be enough to simply keep track of all of these marbles in isolation. So when we start thinking, wow, patterns have this nice leverage, just like a lever that I can use to move a big boulder that I wouldn't be strong enough to move on my own, but when I put a lever under it, I have more power and I can actually move the boulder. Patterns have this nice leverage that enable me to do things with my counting with my fingers that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So we start thinking, well, how can I leverage this power of patterns even more? Well, say that I've got some marbles and I just start trying to organize them, and every time I get a handful of pattern, let's say a handful is every time that I've got one marble to match up with every finger on one hand. Every time I can collect that many marbles to match up with all the fingers and thumb on my hand, I package those together and say, okay, that's one handful of marbles there. That's I've got a hand. That's a handful. That matches up with, I could even make this look nicer. Say, look, that's anytime I package up my marbles, that corresponds to exactly one hand's worth, one handful of them. And I keep going, and as I go along, I find more. I am able to put together more and more of these hand-sized, here's one hand size. If I'm going to keep doing this, I better make this guy even smaller. and I make another hand worth and another hand worth and another hand worth. Well, eventually I've got enough of these hand-sized packages of marbles that I could pull in. I could use my hand to actually count the number of these packages that I have. So now I have each small package has one hand's worth of marbles, and now I'm using my hand to count off and match these packages themselves with the fingers on my hand. And when I get enough to get a handful of packages, I package those together into a medium-sized package, so that now I've got a medium-sized package consisting of a handful of smaller packages, each of which consists of a handful of marbles. So now I have this nice structure where I used my hand once to create these. I used my hand to create these small packages, and then I used hand counting on the small packages to create the medium package, and I can keep going and keep making medium packages out of smaller ones as I find more and more marbles. And once I've got enough marbles to make enough small packages to make enough medium packages, that I have one medium package to match all of the fingers and thumb on my hand, then I can package those medium packages together into a bigger package, where now I've got marbles in the middle, and those packaged together into a small packages, which are packaged by hand size into medium packages, which are packaged by hand size into big packages. And we could keep going with that. Wow, that's a lot of marbles there. Look at all those marbles. Well, that's a whole lot of marbles. That would take a long time to count. That would be hard to keep track of that many marbles. But in fact, if I use this hand pattern, every one of these, there's a consistent pattern here. Every one of these small packages, I've only had to count off as many marbles as I have in my hand. And every one of these medium packages, I've only had to count off as many small packages as I have fingers on my hand. And for every big package, I've only had to count off as many medium packages as I have fingers and thumb on my hand. Whoa, looks like one of these packages got broken. Let's fix it. And then for every one of these really big packages, I only have to count off as many big packages as I have fingers and thumb on my hand. So I don't have to use anything bigger than one hand to count this many marbles. I'm just using my hand over and over again into larger and larger patterns and larger packages, and I can keep track of, whoa, this many marbles by just successively using my hand to make patterns over and over and over again. Well, that's nice. Well, how could I mean, that works well if I have exactly this many marbles that fit nicely into this packaging scheme that I have. I'm going to need to find more ways to keep track of, what if I don't quite have this many marbles? I don't have enough to, what if I don't have enough to make, to make this package? Let's get rid of that whole thing. What if I don't have enough to make this many marbles? How am I going to do that? What if I've got, just one? Can I just grab? That's going to be hard for me to do. Zoom in. What if I'm missing just one marble here? How am I going to do that? These are things that I'm going to have to keep thinking about, but I have found one interesting tool is that by using the power of patterns and using my patterns over and over again, I can account for an incredibly large number of marbles.